Welcome. My name is Mark DePue. I'm the Director of Oral History with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, and I'm once again with Jerry Raschke. Gerald is your formal name, but for your life you've gone by Jerry, right?
Yeah.
This is our third session. Today is Monday, October 29th. It doesn't seem like 2018 is almost over, but it is. The years fly by, and being at your stage of life, you know that better than I do, probably, Jerry.
Yes, I think so.
What I wanted to do to start with today, I thought it would be fun to get a little bit of explanation about the jacket you're wearing. What do we call that jacket?
It's a regular flight jacket. It was issued to me in 1940s, and it's been with me ever since. And this designates the number of missions I have flown. And then over here is the ME-109 that I shot down. And then on the back of it, you want me to turn around?
No, just go ahead and explain what's on the back.
On the back, I have a picture of Lady Lynn, which was the last, my last mission I flew in Lady Lynn. My daughter, Linda, is named after Lady Lynn. Shortly after I left to go back to the States, I was in Chorley, England, and a next group came in, and they knew me, and they knew that Lady Lynn was one of my ships. And he said, "Hey, Lady Lynn was shot down, and it was shot down over Bordeaux." And 2 or 3 members of that crew were killed. A pilot was really shot up pretty bad. A co-pilot was shot up, but he was able to somewhat control the ship, and they were trying to find an air base, and they wanted to go into Lille, France, and they were informed that they can't land there because there was a fighter formation landing there at the time, and they were running out of gas. So fortunately, no, I think they had to go to Lille, France, and that was very fortunate because there was a hospital there that could take care of the wounded, but they didn't make it to the field, and they crashed just before they got to the field.
Hmm. How many bombs do you have on that flight jacket?
61.
61 combat missions.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about quite a few of those. We've already had 2 sessions, as you know, and talked a lot about your early months when you got to the European theater. But 61 missions, and you're just describing what happened shortly after you left. And that's, as we go through these missions over and over again, fate tempted you.
Yes, I don't know whether this is what you're after, but I was on 61 missions. We were shot up. I was shot down 3 times, forced down. I shouldn't say shot down, but yeah. Anyway, forced down 3 times, and we came back with many holes in the ship. But of all the 61 missions, never once was anybody on my ship wounded or killed. But we had some bad times, and my flak helmet got hit, and my flak suit got hit, and somebody up there was looking out for me.
Well, we're going to return to that theme a couple times as we go through a lot of this. Last time you talked about the first time you were forced down, but you wanted to spend a little bit of time telling me a little bit more, something that didn't come up in our discussion.
Let's see, that was okay, well, I don't know what I left out, but I'll tell you what it was. We were over target, and I don't know what happened. We had to salvo our bombs, but it didn't work. One of them got caught up in the open bomb bay. Well, the bombardier's position is in the nose, as expected, but in order to get out of the nose, the co-pilot has to back up his chair and the bombardier crawl between them. Well, they couldn't do that because the crew was having a time controlling a ship. So as I'm the armament man, it was my job to go back to see what was wrong. By the way, just before when there was bombs away, I heard an "uh-oh" over the intercom, and I knew something was wrong, and it was. Excuse me. And so I went back to the bomb bay, and one side of the bombs was held up by one of the bombs against the catwalk and against the bomb bay door. And I had to, there's a propeller-like thing that takes the, fuses the bomb. And if that comes out, then the bomb is armed. Well, I had to, it was going around, so I had to push in the propeller so it wouldn't go around any longer. And then I got one foot on the bomb bay door and one foot on the catwalk and tried to get that one bomb loose so it'll come out. And fortunately, it wasn't hung up too bad. And I was able to do it. And I got that one out, and the rest of them came out. The rest of them were armed. And I don't know what they hit, and I wasn't about to look because I was trying to get back out of the bomb bays. The bomb bays closed. So the bomb bays were open for so long that they were running out of fuel, and he couldn't get back to Sardinia. Excuse me. And so we landed in a fighter base, a vacated fighter base north of Rome. And we came down very nicely, very safely. And but we couldn't come back and turn around and go around and come back, even if the engines were fixed, because the runway was too short. And we were out of the aircraft, kind of milling around, and there were other people around. I don't know where all those people came from, but we weren't too far from Rome. And all of a sudden, the ship caught fire. And the pilot had mentioned to me before, he says, I'm going to put you in for a DFC, which was sounding good to me. And but then the ship burned, and the pilot didn't do anything about it because the ship was destroyed. And a little later, a jeep came along, and we got to see Rome because we weren't too far from Rome. And I got some pictures of Rome in my And anyway, we got back to the base, and I continued my missions.
Well, I wanted to, as we go through here today, there's several missions that I wanted to talk about. And a lot of this, I'm going to kind of prompt your memory by reading things reading things that were on your mission reports that you had written down at the time. Mission number 22, this is on November 6th, 1944, against Dulce Railroad Fill in Italy. And your crew was flying the Brenner Pass area.
Yeah.
So you already remember this one. Here's what you wrote in your logbook. Brenner Pass area was in the top turret. Would you believe that the Germans on the ground were shooting down at us from the top of the mountains?
Yes. I didn't realize that. I don't remember that I was in the top turret, but that would make sense. Because in the tail, I wouldn't be able to see it too much. But I was in the top turret. And in the Brenner Pass, we were bombing the bridges right on the edge of the mountain. And so we had to be pretty close to the mountain. And we didn't think much of it. We'd done those missions before and since. But here, looking up on the top of the mountains, I could see, even from the tail position or the turret, tracers coming down at me. And the Germans had somehow got their machine guns at the top of a mountain and were shooting down at us. Now, we were going about 200, 250 miles an hour, and they were stationary, and we were far enough away. I don't think they ever hit any of us. But it was kind of a funny situation.
Yeah, well, what's going through your brain when you're watching these tracer bullets come towards you?
Ducking, but but no, it was no problem. It was just an odd experience, and we had lots of odd experiences.
That's what strikes me about people on any of these bomber crews going over Europe at the time. Yeah, the instinct is to duck.
Yeah,
but there's nowhere to hide.
There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere. You can do what I do. When I get in heavy flak, I crawl into my flak suit and cover myself up pretty much. But
okay, the next one. Well, before we go there, we had talked last time. Are you still at this stage, about midway through your bombing tours, moving from one aircraft to the next, back and forth?
And we never flew the same aircraft too often. I don't know, the headquarters just assigned what crews you're going to be flying with and what ship you're going to be flying on. And yeah, I went to probably a dozen different aircraft.
With a dozen different crews that you're filling in with. Is that right?
Yes and no. For example, Lieutenant Asher was my primary pilot, but yes, with different enlisted men.
Okay.
And of course, a different co-pilot, because the co-pilots were being trained to become first pilots. So I had a lot of different co-pilots. But Lieutenant Asher became my primary pilot after my pilot was killed.
Well, something just occurred to me. A lieutenant, he's probably joined the military after the war started. So how old would most of these pilots be?
Most of the pilots, my pilot was probably one of the oldest ones, and he was, I think, 26. And so, yeah, I think he was probably one of the oldest ones because he had been in prior to the war. And most of them were 23, 24.
It's an awful lot of responsibility to put on a young man.
You bet your life it is. Those pilots, especially on B-26s, were very, very good pilots. If we got into combat, the pilot was very, very good.
Next mission here is mission number 25. You're in aircraft 16. You're flying against this, I'm going to butcher some names here, the San Ambrogio Railroad Fill in Italy. And that's November 16th. And here's what you wrote for that mission. Not on mission. While ferrying to Dijon, Lieutenant Hissey hit bad weather and went down with full crew. So you're referring to Lieutenant Hissey's, wasn't on the mission?
Yeah. When you read that again, I can't bring it to mind, right?
Not on mission. While ferrying to Dijon, Lieutenant Hissey hit bad weather and went down with the full crew.
Okay. I was ferrying to Dijon. Okay. We were coming from Bastia, Corsica, to Dijon, but the crews were still flying. I was not flying that day, but this pilot was, and he went down with a full crew.
Well, and the reason I mentioned it, it wasn't just enemy flak and aircraft you had to worry about, was it?
No, in a B-26, no, B-26 was a very dangerous ship. The crew, the air crew, the ground crew took extremely good care of the aircraft. Very seldom did we have something go wrong with the aircraft, I'll say, on takeoff, which is not an unusual situation. But our ground crew people were first class, and they took great care of the aircraft. Some of them flew 100 missions without failing to take off. And so that gives you an idea. I don't know what happened on that particular one and why they went down.
Okay. Just the next mission, mission 26, against Vicio, Italy.
Vecchio.
Okay. November 17th, in aircraft number 16 again. Intense flak came back with a number of holes in the ship.
Well, that's not unusual. I don't remember that particular mission offhand. But I think I mentioned the last time, when the Germans were retreating, either in Italy or in France, the one thing they always took with them was their German 88s. The German 88 was the best, so far as I'm concerned, the best artillery weapon of the war. And that's when they retreated, the one thing they took with them. Well, as a result of that, there's a bigger and bigger and a bigger and a larger concentration of German 88s on any of our targets. So as the war went on and as the Germans retreated, we got more and more flak. Now, on a number of my missions, I show milk runs. But that doesn't mean no flak. I call it a milk run if the flak is not close to us. What the Germans do, they time their artillery shells to go off at a particular height. Now, if they're bursting not at our height, it's a milk run. When it's bursting at our height, then we're going to have problems. And that's when we have holes in the ship. So if I say a milk run, usually we'll always have some flak. Maybe only one battery going, but sometimes, for example, in Toulon, there were 150 guns aimed at us. And by the way, many of those were manned by women, and they were good.
For the flak, I would imagine that it doesn't have to hit the aircraft directly to be a danger.
No. If it does, well, of course, you're down. But see, the shrapnel from the flak is just really small little bits of metal, and they'll put a hole in a ship. And if it's a close hit, well, you're going to have a lot of holes, and then it's going to go straight through, and you hit your flak suit and hit your flak helmet and wound people. If the shell is coming down, sometimes it's just normal falling metal, and it may, depending upon our speed, will put a hole in the ship because we're flying into it.
Mm-hmm. What would be the most vulnerable place in the ship?
Pilot and the engines, of course.
How about fuel lines?
Well, we got hit in the fuel line a couple times. In fact, that's what we thought happened in that one aircraft that burned up when we crashed north of Rome. But I don't know.
Okay. Well, the next one I wanted to mention, I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously, but Mission 28 against Rovereto, Italy.
Rovereto?
Yeah.
Okay.
Boy, you got the pronunciation of these places down well.
It's been a long time, but go ahead.
And you told me before that was the second time that you were forced down, but I think you just talked about that experience.
Yes.
Okay. And because that's where you're...
Rovereto, what did I say there?
Well, I don't have anything written down for that one, but when we talked earlier...
Because the first one I went down on was Toulon. And we had 200 holes in the aircraft. I got something to say about that one. 200 holes in the aircraft. And the pilot didn't think he could get back to Sardinia, which is still quite a distance. So he landed in Bastia, Corsica. And nobody was injured or anything like that. Everything was fine. But one thing about that, no. It was later when we moved to Bastia, Corsica. I mentioned about Toulon. One of the ships was shot down over Toulon. 3 of them were shot down on one of our missions, and one of them parachuted right square in the middle of Toulon. And the French hid them when they got down to the ground. The French came along and they hid the crew members, except for one. The pilot's parachute either didn't open properly or was caught fire, and he took a hard landing. And one of the crew members saw the Germans come and shoot him. But in their favor, they think that the pilot was so broken up, broken bones and stuff like that, the German probably put him out of his misery. But anyway, one of the crew members, enlisted men, and that's why I know about this one. I don't know what happened to the others. One of the crew members, the French got him to the Italian partisans. And he fought with the partisans for a month or so. I can't remember how long. And when we were stationed in Corsica, after one of our missions, we came and here Hoyne walked into the camp. He looked the worse for the wear, but that was his first mission, that he was shot down. So he went home.
Corsica at the time was Vichy-occupied France territory?
Yes.
Okay. So it was German occupation.
Oh, no. At that time, it was not German occupation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. November 22nd, 1944. That was the date, I understand at least, that the unit moved from Corsica to Longwy.
Okay. Yes.
And
which we call Dijon, but yeah, Longwy.
It was just a little bit south and east of Dijon.
Yeah.
Tell me about that move.
Well, I don't remember that much about it, except we went by truck we went by boat to Marseille, and from there, we went from truck to Lovie, and prepare and started putting up our tents and getting things ready and all that sort of thing. And I can't remember exactly, but that took 2 or 3 days.
Let's see if we can get the map up here of France at that time. And on that map, when we find it here, it's got a little star, and it's right in the center of eastern France, I guess you could
Yes.
say. So that was quite it's a bigger move than I would have thought.
Well, yeah. Well, we had to get close. We were no longer bombing Italy, and we were bombing Germany, and we had to get closer to Germany, and that's where we were. And then later on, just before I was leaving, finished my missions, we moved to Dole, France, which we made us closer to Germany.
Okay. What were your, you're now in France. By that time, the Germans have been pushed out of that area, obviously. You're something of a liberation force. What was your impressions of that?
That is a funny situation. We landed in, we got to Longwy, and the French were there welcoming us. Actually, they thought we were responsible for freeing them, because the Germans were still on the other side of Dijon, and they were retreating, and we were the first ones actually in, other than the advanced American troops. And kiddingly, they thought we freed them, but we didn't deny it. But
one of the notes that you had in your write-up of these missions, and it was an excellent narration of what you experienced. One of the comments was that the citizens of Dijon hung their mare. You remember that?
they what? Oh yes. Well, just before I got there, like I say, the Germans had just left, and they hung the police chief. He was a German sympathizer, and the French didn't waste any time hanging him.
Yeah, that makes you realize how serious this business was.
It was very big.
Tell me about the compound, the base that you had. Was it long court or
Langecourt. It was a little village north of Dijon. On the picture there, that was on also Langecourt, but that was the main chateau.
Were you billeted in that tent area that's in front?
The 442nd was billeted there. We were in the small chateau, and that's right there. And that's the rear of the small chateau. Madame Monnier owned that chateau, and she ran the bar next to the chateau. And I had my first drink of French wine in her bar. And oh, it was delicious wine. I just really loved it. And I'm not a drinker, but oh, I love that. Never got it again. Never, well, not for many, many years. I never got it again. You want me to tell the story?
Yeah, sure.
When I came back home, I looked all over creation for that red wine. And like I said, I don't drink, but I tried different kinds of it, never would get it. In 1980, I think it was 1980 or 85, I can't remember which, I went back and visited Langecourt. I went and visited Dijon. And the citizens of Dijon put on a big party in their, I guess it was kind of a castle. And so all of us GIs were there that were...
So this is a party honoring you guys.
Yes, yes. And so there we were having a kind of a reunion. My outfit was having a reunion there. Anyway, we were in this big thing, and they were giving us wine glasses, and so we were holding the wine glasses, and the waiters come by and put a little red stuff in it, and so okay. And then next waiters then come around, they put champagne in it. And I tasted it, and there's my wine. And let's see, how can I forget that? It's a very, very famous drink, and I'll think of it before it's over. But anyway, there was my, so it's made out of champagne, and I can't think of the red stuff. I'll think of it. And
So it's unique then, sounds like.
oh yeah, and it was made, by the way, the mayor of Dijon is the one that originated that drink. Anyway, I found my. I am sorry I screwed you up.
No, that's fine. That's why we sit here and hear these stories. Did you have a lot of interaction with the French then once you got there?
Not a lot. First of all, I couldn't speak French. Most of them could not speak English. Some of the GIs went after the females, of course. I was not. I don't know why, but I wasn't interested. Probably because I was so young. Anyway, I went around the city of Dijon, and they had a GI. What do you call them?
USO?
USO, and so I went to the USO quite a bit, and it was fun. But we didn't get into town very often because it was about 20 or 30 miles to town, so I didn't get to town very much.
Did they have Americans operating the USO?
Yes.
Young ladies included?
Honestly, I can't remember. But yes, I'm sure. I'm sure that that's right.
Okay.
But frankly, I can't remember.
Well, that might lead to the next question here, and it deals with mail call. How important was mail and mail call to you?
Oh, I mean, it's very important because when we moved of course, the Americans did a great job of getting the mail to us. When we were first in Sardinia, it took a while to get the mail to me. But then once it started coming in, it was fairly regular. It took time. They had emails. You know what emails were?
Well, I've heard about
V-mails. And it was a photostatic copy of letters, and that was pretty good. My girlfriend at the time wrote me a lot. My mother wrote me. I did not write them as much as they wrote me.
Did you save any of those letters?
Yeah, a few of them I think are in my archives at home somewhere buried. But yeah, there were. I didn't bring back much.
Did your mom and Mildred save all of your letters?
Yes, pretty much so. My girlfriend did, especially. And we were. Okay, you opened up the question. We were laying in Mildred's bed in her room, fully dressed, and she pulled out all the letters that had been returned to her after I left France. There were mail back and forth. It wasn't an immediate delivery. Sometimes it took a week or 10 days to get mail back and forth. So we were reading the letters, and one of them mentioned, I don't know whether it was her letter to me or my letter to her, mentioned marriage, and I said, well, would you marry me? And that's where we...
So you did it through the mail.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it was on her bed that I proposed.
Okay, but the subject of marriage came up in the letter?
Yeah.
Well, that is interesting.
Yeah.
But that happened, I would assume...
After I got back home.
After you got back home. Well, I would think that you look forward to the letters from Mildred even more than letters from everybody else.
Yeah, of course.
Anything else get delivered through the mail?
To me?
Yeah, cookies or newspapers.
Yeah, we got our packages, the cookies and stuff like that. Yeah, they came sometimes crushed, but yes, they got through. And of course, they didn't last very long with the other boys in the tent, but that was the same way with them. When they got a package, they divided it up too.
Were you able to keep up with the war news?
Yes, because there was a, I think it's the Stripes or something like that.
The Stars and Stripes.
Stars and Stripes. But that was usually a little bit late. And not up-to-date news at all. Most of the update news was through our intelligence. They would tell us where the Germans had retreated to and where our pockets of defense were going to be, things of that nature. But we didn't get news, we got intelligence news.
By this time, by the time you got to France, you'd been in the war for a couple, 3 months. This is hard on people. So I'm wondering about if you ever had a chance to get an R&R.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Like I said, I was kind of stupid. I wanted to go through the war without going to rest camp.
Rest camp.
Yeah, it's a rest camp, and it was okay. I didn't want to go to. I wanted to finish my. That was stupid of me, very stupid of me. But anyway, that's not unusual either. And I was scheduled to on a mission to fly with a major. I said, "Oh, good! This is going to be a good pilot." Okay, he's a major and everything like that. So we got on and we started to take our mission, and he took off, and we took off, and we flew just over treetop after treetop for a long. He couldn't get the plane in the air. Fortunately for me, the mission was canceled shortly thereafter, which is not unusual. So he turned around and landed the aircraft. I found out later that he had never flown a bomber, a B-26, fully loaded. And that's why he couldn't gain altitude. We're lucky that he even took off. And I saw a schedule to go with him the next day. I put in for a rest camp right now. And I had over 50 missions at that time, as I remember. And I got to go to rest camp. I went to Annecy, France, which is on the border of Switzerland and France. And you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
And so Susie was there. Susie worked in the kitchen. I mean, no fancy stuff. Anyway, we became friends, and she could speak a little English. And so I said, I want to go skiing. And so she took me and 2 or 3 others skiing. And she could ski, but not that well, and we couldn't ski at all. Anyway, she took us a ways away, and I can't remember why or anything like that. And we started skiing, and pretty soon we heard shots, and somebody was shooting at us. We didn't realize that we'd got into Switzerland. And the Swiss police, I don't think they were trying to hit us. Maybe they're trying to scare us off. But we sure as the devil got them out of there fast. And but we had a real nice time at Annecy. They had kind of GI food, but they doctored it up. The French doctored it up. It was pretty delicious stuff. I can never remember liking Spam, but they had some pretty good Spam there.
I'm curious how old Susie was.
Oh, she must have been about 18, 16, 17. Well, I'll tell you about Susie too. Got another thing. We were in Longview, and we had to go across the street to go to our mess hall, which is fine. And I had my mess kit in my hand and was going across it. And I looked down the road, and I saw somebody walking. Now, I don't know how, I can't remember now, how I thought that might be Susie. And it was. And she was quite a ways away. And so we struck up a conversation. She was walking from Annecy to, I think she said Paris. I don't know exactly where.
That's a long walk.
That's a long way. And she was walking at that time. And so she was hungry. So I said, okay, you just wait here. And I took my mess kit in and filled it up with food and brought it back to her. And she ate. And we had a nice conversation. She walked on, and I went back to the mess hall and got some food for myself. But anyway, that was my last meeting with Susie.
It's one of those ironies of life, isn't it?
Right. I mean, who would ever think, well, who would ever think it?
Okay. Did you get a chance to go in any USO shows while you were in country?
Yeah. Well, when we were in Algiers, we went to one, and Ben Blue was in it, and Ava Gardner. No, it wasn't Ava Gardner. It was Sheridan.
Ann Sheridan.
Ann Sheridan, and that was a great time. And there were a couple other shows. Bob Hope came quite often and something like that. And we would go to them, yes, but not a lot.
Okay.
Not many would come to our little place. They would go to the bigger cities.
Okay, well, we're going to get you back to missions here. You're flying for what, the 7th Army by this time? General Patch?
No, well, yes, Patch and Patton, depending upon later on. The 7th Army, the 3rd Army and 7th Army kind of came together when the 7th Army went up from the south, and the 3rd Army was coming from the east. And so sometimes we were bombing for Patton, sometimes for Patch. Yes, Patch was our primary target area.
Okay. So I'm still in November, late November maybe, of 1944. By that time, the Allies had liberated almost all of France and moving into Belgium and the Low Countries.
Yeah.
Were you guys thinking at that time that it was just a matter of time the war was wrapping up?
No, I don't think we ever thought that, because the Germans were great fighters, and the Nazis wouldn't let them stop. And so, no, I don't think so. We had a lot of work to be done. Yes, we knew they were retreating and closing in, but we had a lot of work to do yet.
Okay. Mission number 32 against a defensive area in Otterbach, Germany on December 14th. And you're in aircraft number 2, and here's what you wrote for that mission. Our aircraft lost engine over target area. We barely landed safely. Rough landing, but had first-class pilot at controls.
Okay, that.
And I think that's the 3rd time that you were
that's
forced.
the 3rd time. We were shot up, but first of all, the B-26 was a strong aircraft. We could take a lot of damage, and if we had pilots, they were good pilots, because all the bad pilots were already dead. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I mean that. And Asher was the pilot then, and he was my primary pilot. And we were shot up somewhat, and the engine was coughing, and so we came in straight in, hot. Well, Asher unfortunately got us also caught in prop wash of the ship ahead of us, and so we went like that and had a crash landing with a full bomb load. And so we got out of that ship butt fast. I go out of the. In fact, the only thing that was damaged was my knee. I hit my knee on the escape hatch, and I caught my ring on the escape hatch, and it's slightly, right here. There's a chip in the ring that I have as a result of that. Other than that, no problems.
What's the significance of the ring that you obviously wore through the entire war?
Well, I had a tough time getting through high school, by the way. I'm lucky to get through it. And my mom took me down to Brown Jewelry in Omaha to pick out a ring for graduation. I did not want a regular graduation ring. And this is the ring I picked out for my graduation ring. I've worn it ever since.
What's the stone that's there?
Sardonyx.
Sardonyx.
Which is the August
okay.
Stone.
Very good. Well, the 14th, we just talked about that mission, number 32. It was December the 16th that the Germans launched the Ardennes campaign, what we know as the Battle of the Bulge, and that went on for well over a month. Any comments about that? Because that surprised a lot of people.
No, well, we were not involved in the actual Battle of the Bulge. We were too far south. But we had to fly. We were supposed to fly to help them. Well, that winter was the coldest winter in Europe, I think forever, so far as I know. And I do mean it was cold. Well, for 13 straight days, I was scheduled to fly with my good friend Rahl, R-A-H-L. Don't ask me his first name, I can't remember. And the ground crew and sometime once, twice, I guess I did in that 13 days. We slept under the wings of the ship, so we could take off at a moment's notice with the weather breaking. Weather didn't break. Anyway, for something like 13 days, I was scheduled to fly with Rawl. On the 13th day, the mission took off, but I was put onto a different ship. And I found out later, upon looking at my records, that what happened was, I thought that Rawl was put on, I didn't know what happened. I found out Rawl joined his crew, his regular crew, and I was put on a different ship. And Rawl and his crew went down, were shot up, and they crashed in France, and all of them died. I could have been on that ship.
Yeah, that takes us back to how fickle fate is. Or
Yeah, it really is.
Well, we're still talking about the weather, though. Was the aircraft heated when you went up?
Oh, you're kidding. You're kidding. No, it was.
I would think the tail is a pretty cold place to be.
Well, there were times when it was 50 degrees below zero when we were flying. And no, and the wind came in like you wouldn't believe. The waist windows were open, of course, because we had guns sticking out. And that air would come through and hit right in the tail. Yes, it was cold.
And it wasn't just cold for you guys in the air, but you were talking before about how dedicated the ground crews were.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking they weren't in hangars working on the aircraft. They were outside.
Yeah, they were outside a lot. I can't say enough for the ground crews.
I can't imagine the intricate kind of work that they have to do in engines and the electrical systems and that kind of thing, working in the cold with that bitter cold.
Yep. I give them all the credit in the world.
Well, during the Battle of the Bulge, obviously.
Okay, I can say something about that. We did take off. And so Patton had already started his march up to the Bulge. But we did do some bombing ahead of him until we ran out of him, or he ran out of us, whichever it was. And but then we bombed other things. We kept on bombing, but we did not do too much for the Bulge itself. But Patton got there in time. I don't know whether you know the story or not, but when they were talking about the Battle of the Bulge, the top brass were talking, and they said, "Patton, can you get up there to save us?" And I believe that something was mentioned that it's going to take about a week. How long is it going to take you? 24 hours. And he got his unit going, including my brother, within 24 hours going to the Bulge. Patton didn't fool around.
Yeah, I recently read about that experience, and he had already had his staff planning for that move long before that moment.
Absolutely. He was that kind of a general.
Well, mission number 35 is on Christmas Eve against Langenen Railroad Bridge. How do you pronounce that?
Langenen, I think.
Langenen, the Railroad Bridge in Germany. Here's what you wrote on that particular day. It sounds like it was a pretty uneventful mission, but then you have this. My friend Thompson was killed today.
Yeah.
Would you believe he was killed by a truck that went out of control? He was crossing the street while going to the mess hall.
Yeah, Thompson was in basic training with me in in Amarillo. And so I've known him for a long time. We weren't close, but I'd known him for a long time. And he was crossing the highway from our camp to the mess hall, and he was ran over by a truck and killed. I don't know how many missions he had in at the time, but he had quite a few in.
It's just there were so many ways to die.
Yeah.
What did the unit typically do when somebody died or the entire aircraft went down?
We didn't do anything.
There was no kind of religious service?
No. I mean, if they were crashed in our area, yeah, for example, pilot was killed in Sardinia. Yeah, and he was in Sardinia, so we buried what was left of him in Sardinia. And my co-pilot was killed in France, along with a guy. The pilot was Omaha, Nebraska, believe it or not. And we buried him in France. Yes, when they were on the field or in France or nearby, yes, we would bury them. But most of the time we, how do I want to say it? I don't want to be so nasty, but we couldn't dwell on it.
Was there any kind of religious service?
No.
Was there anything toasting them in the bar or anything like that?
No. No. Once our people were killed, unless they were a close friend, we didn't dwell on it at all, because if we dwelt on those things with as much people were killed and wounded and stuff like that, we couldn't dwell on it. Otherwise, it'd go to our head. People did get Flak happy. It's probably because they thought about things like that. No, most of us didn't pay much attention.
Part of the defensive mechanism, then.
Yeah, I would say so.
But I've read a little bit about this as well. Were you thinking at the time that you're going to survive, or was there a thought maybe that it's just a matter of time and my number's up?
Well, it's always that. It was always that, because there were a lot of us going down, and especially, like say, over Toulon or one of these other Stuttgart and stuff like that, where they were heavily defended. Yeah, we had that in mind, but I just curled up in my flak suit and stuff like that and hoped for the best. But no, at least me, I didn't dwell on it. I thought I would finish my missions, yes.
Okay. So I know that religion is going to be very important to you later. Were you going to services on a regular basis there?
Well, not on a regular basis, but shortly after my pilot was killed, I did join a Bible class. And that was my first dealing with religion on a serious basis. And but I did go to Bible class, and there, on occasion when we'd have a nearby service, I would go to it, but not religiously.
Okay. Did that help you, going to the Bible class?
No, I don't think so. I don't think, as I try to recollect, I don't think it had any bearing on the matter at all.
Well, and here's speculation, but I would imagine some people think, well, where's the evidence of God? There is no God. I don't believe in.
Oh, no.
Just the opposite?
Just the opposite, boy. He was always there so far as we were concerned. Yeah, so God saw me through it, and I thanked him every time I come down from a mission, that's for sure. No, we were, everybody, of course, not everybody was close to a church or to a God, but a lot of us were.
Now, you're going on these missions, it's very intense, and then you come back, and you do have time to think about things if you try to dwell on it. What were you planning to do after the war at that moment in your life?
Get married. Frankly, I was still very young. See, when you're talking there, I'm only 19. So when you're 19, you aren't thinking too much about things like that. You're thinking about girls and getting married and what kind of work am I going to do? And I didn't know what kind of work I was going to do. I knew I was going to go to school. I should have gone to university, but I was never a good student, so I went to a business college, which worked out quite well for me.
Well, we're going to get to that here when we get through with the war. But we're still in December of 1944. In fact, Christmas. Do you remember Christmas Day?
Yeah, I was going to say, are you skipping Christmas? No, I came down from that mission. I think it was on the 24th, wasn't it?
Yes.
Actually, I was one of those that was planning a Christmas party for the children. And so I came down. I think I came down right from the mission and went right to the party, I think. I'm not sure. But we had a grand party for the kids. The kids got a lot of candy and stuff like that they didn't have. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the kids a little bit later after I finish this. But anyway, we had a grand party. I was kind of scheduled to play Santa Claus, but I was too late. Had another person playing Santa Claus. And on the picture that they show, which you may have, I don't know, shows a little girl on Santa's lap. When I went back in 1980 or 85, I looked for that girl. Her husband ran the other bar in Longview, and she had a little daughter, and the daughter looked exactly like her. And so we got reacquainted in that respect. And if you have that picture, I wish you'd show it, and so that the people would get to see that.
We don't have it here, but we will make sure we include that in your collection.
Yeah,
because I do remember seeing that picture.
Yeah, and then the picture afterward showing her as a grown woman with a girl next to her. And so we had a grand time. Now, talking about the children, see, when we were there, remember the Germans had just left, and frankly, a lot of them were starving. And so the kids would come to the mess hall, and when we would come out, we'd have some stuff left over in our mess kits before we went to the garbage pails. And the kids would take that food. And much of it, of course, was edible. And then a little later, some of us said, no, we're going to do it this way. We got food for them, and then they had better food. And the kids got fed fairly well by the GIs.
It makes you realize just how desperate they were before.
Oh, they were desperate. The Germans had been starving them. And of course, they were in a farming community, so they had some of their crops, but this is in the dead of winter and the worst winter they had, so they didn't have much stuff left.
When you went back there many, many years later, did this woman express any appreciation for what
absolutely.
the Americans did?
Oh, yeah. I became very... See, I met, the first time I went back, Madame Monnier was still alive. And she came out, and of course she was just delighted with her daughter. And then this young lady, this woman, I got their names down in my book somewhere. I can't think of them offhand. And in the big chateau that you showed there before, was a countess lived there. She was 18 years old at that one there. And she was 18 years old at the time, and they said that she had been killed. Well, that wasn't true. When I went back in 80, I stayed at the chateau as a bed and breakfast, and the countess was there. The French had hidden her from the Germans, and she didn't show up again until after the war.
Yeah.
And she was delightful. And her son, Roland, was there, and we had a great time.
But obviously, Christmas doesn't slow down the war. You guys were on a mission the very next day.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
And it was that mission, and we had talked about this the last time, but it was that mission, according to your mission log, that's the one where you saw the ME-262 jet.
Oh, yeah. That was, we were on that mission, and we hadn't really heard, I don't think I even heard of the jets at that time. And a flight of them, I don't know how many were in the flight, came through, and I shot down 3 of us right just like that. I never seen anything like that before, and they flew so fast that we didn't see them. When they came around again to come after us, they didn't hit us, nor did we hit any of them. We couldn't hit them; they were too darn fast. We didn't have a defense for them because they were so fast. Later, we developed a defense for them, but the thing is that at that time of the war, the German, the heavies, the liberators bombed Ploesti, the fortresses bombed other refineries, and we bombed them. The Germans were running out of fuel. And so even in the ME-109 and stuff like that, they could only make one pass before they ran out of fuel. And the same way with the jets. They ran out of fuel after one pass. So in a sense, the heavy bombers bombing the oil fields and the refineries saved our lives, because the Germans ran out of fuel, and their fighter aircraft. By the way, if they had the fuel, and say the war lasted 6 months longer, they might have won, because those jets outdid everything we had.
Okay. We're into January now, 45. Mission number 40 against Rastatt, Germany. And here's what you wrote for that day. At rendezvous, before getting in the target, the new 08 with Lieutenant McMurdy had engine trouble and went down with full crew, including my very good friend Rawl. You just talked about him. I had been scheduled to fly with them.
Okay, that's the story I told.
And here's what else you wrote on that day. On the same mission, also hit by 20 Me-109s. That's the standard German fighter aircraft. But escorts kept them away from us. French Spitfires and American P-47s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one time we met last time as well, you did talk about the Red Tails.
Yeah. The Red Tails would fly cover for us on occasion. And we could see the Germans out into the distance. But when they saw the Red Tails, I don't know whether they knew the Red Tails or not, but anyway, they would never come in on us with the Red Tails. They did come in on us with the 51s and the 47s, but with the Red Tails, they must have been scared stiff of them. And we didn't know at the time, and I don't know whether they knew at the time, that there was black pilots.
Well, that was getting to my next question then. What do you think, looking back at that, about the American policy at the time to segregate the blacks from the whites?
Of course, I'm sorry, but I've always been against that. I've been against that because I had many playmates that were black in my grade school and high school. In fact, one of my favorite guys running against me, I was a fast runner, and if he got a head start, he won. If I got a head start, I won. And no, we were great friends. But there was a lot of racial tension then. My dog was a racist.
When you grew up, you mean?
Yeah, when I was growing up, because the blacks lived, say, on 24th Street, and they would go down to the Carter Lake, which is to the east of me. And they used to go by my house, but my dog wouldn't let them. I mean, he'd take the seat of their pants out. And so they would come about 1 block west of us and go north 1 block and then go down 2 blocks. They would go around us. But anyway, my dad's good friend was black, so we didn't have any problem with the blacks.
When you were in France, you were in Dijon, the front is moving forward, you're in a relatively secure rear area. There were a lot of black support units around.
No.
Didn't see any.
I didn't see any. I if they did, I didn't notice them.
Okay. So you didn't see any kind of racial incidents while you were there?
No, I didn't see any racial tension while I was in the service.
Okay.
Maybe, for example, in Amarillo or something like that, but not in the flying units. We didn't have time for that.
Mission number 44 against Messkrieg, German railroad station on February 22nd. And this is what you wrote. All-out Air Force effort today. Every aircraft that could fly and carry bombs and or ammo was ordered to fly and hit every target they could find in Germany.
Yeah, we had that every so often. I don't know whether that was in February. So that was after the Battle of the Bulge.
I looked and see what significant event happened on February 22nd. I didn't find anything.
Yeah, I don't think we did that every so often. Every aircraft that could get in the air would fly, and we would. I don't know if there was anything specific about that or not.
Maximum effort, was that a phrase used?
Yeah.
That very next mission, number 45 against Siegelsbach, ammunition dump on February 25th. A beautiful mission.
Oh, I love those.
And here's how you described a beautiful mission. Huge explosions. It shook up our ship And we were at 10,000 feet, a spectacular sight.
Yeah, it was really spectacular. Three of our groups hit 3 separate ammunition dumps. I'll tell you something that please don't take this for the truth, because I don't know. But on a previous mission, I had reported an ammunition pile. I must have been in the waist position for some reason, because I saw it very clearly. And I reported it to intelligence after the briefing. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, intelligence came to the tent and says, "Raschke, watch it." So I had to go to intelligence. They said, "You said you saw an ammunition pile." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Where?" I showed him where on the map. "Are you sure?" I said, "I know I'm sure. That was all it said. That's all it said. And then we went back to the area, and I didn't realize it at the time for the briefing that we were going back to that area. A lot of times I didn't pay attention to briefings. And, and so we hit this area, and I was in the tail, and bombs away, so I didn't have to be watching too much. I whoop, and the ship rose like that. Like a jerk, in my first mission, I yelled, "Flak!" There was no flak. It was the ammunition going up. And you see the Hiroshima? That's what they looked over. 3 of them. And we flew many miles. I think we crossed the Rhine, but I can't remember that. But we saw 3 of those huge things. Okay. Where did that come in? I'm colorblind. I was the only one that reported that thing. Did I see something others didn't see? Who knows? I don't know. But I was the only one that reported that ammunition up. We went after them. And there was one aircraft that may have been damaged by the explosion. And it's in the picture, by the way.
Even at 10,000 feet, huh?
Even at 10,000. Oh boy, that was huge explosion.
Well, a few missions later, mission number 49, on March 12th, you're going against another ammunition dump at Kirkel, Germany. And this is all you had written down, just 2 words. Chaff mission.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say I couldn't even remember what you're talking about. In order to you know what chaff is?
Yes.
Okay.
But I need to have you explain it. So.
Okay. Chaff is a bunch of tin foil that we toss out of the aircraft so that we can fool the anti-aircraft gunners, and it did its job, so that they couldn't hone in on the flight that was doing it. And sometimes the chaff mission was not so hot because they would hone in on us. But I don't think it mattered on that one there. But this chaff mission, we didn't exactly care for it. We had no bombs, but we had a lot of tin foil, and we just kept tossing it out. And of course, that made a great picture on the TVs or the computers that they had. It would show up as like all dark.
On the radar screens.
Yeah.
Would you just mentioned you prefer to fly bombs? You're risking your life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the chaff mission wasn't any, yeah.
Well, again, we're talking March now, middle of March of 1945. I asked this question again. Were you thinking by that time the war's almost over?
No, never once did I think that. Well, I'm sure I must have had some thoughts, but it wasn't a concern of mine, because we had a long ways to go.
Were you hearing anything about what was going on in the war in the Pacific?
Oh yeah, and not as much as you people, the people here in the States did. The Japanese, what we heard was not good. The atrocities of the Japanese, we heard a lot about that. That may have been propaganda, I don't know, but I doubt it. And the Japanese were cruel people. And what they did to our GIs, I find even difficulty today.
Well, moving on about a month or half a month, mission number 56. So you're racking up the missions pretty quick by this time. Against Vishingen Barracks and Depot on April 1st, Easter Day.
Yeah.
Number 77, pilot Lieutenant C.R. Johnston hit and salvoed bombs. It disappeared with engine feathered. Everyone lost.
Yeah. There's, I actually don't remember that ship going down. Who's the pilot, did I say?
C.R. Johnston.
I think I flew with him on occasion. But anyway, on that, did I say Stuttgart, Germany, or is it a little later?
No, that must be later. The Vishingen Barracks.
Okay. I don't remember that one.
Well, there was one other little footnote that you had for this particular mission, and I really found the irony of this statement. Number 28 crash landed with Lieutenant Day of the 8th Army aboard as an observer.
Oh, yeah.
He said he would rather go back to the frontline combat than fly another mission.
Okay, that was kind of fun, and I kind of took, I don't know whether I mentioned it, and I probably didn't even mention it. Toward the end of the war, the people like me would volunteer to go on a routine, what do they call them, where the GIs would go.
Reconnaissance?
Well, yeah, kind of reconnaissance, and the GIs would trade and fly missions with us. Well, the ones that we're talking about there, two groups of GIs volunteered to fly missions, and they were shot up so bad they said no more of that. Okay. But we did some volunteering too, and I did once, just once. And I had my carbine wrapped around on my shoulder, and a sergeant was taking charge of me. He was taking care of me. He was babysitting me, and it was supposed to be no troops, supposed to be no Germans around, and up ahead of us, here comes a squad of Germans around the corner, and one of them pointed his gun at me, and I wheeled my carbine around and had it on an automatic. I got him before he got me, and I can't remember too much, but I think that they disappeared. I think they did. I think they retreated, and I think our boys continued after them. The sergeant, however, didn't let me go. And so we were coming to a house, and for some reason or other, the sergeant wanted to check it. And he found a German officer in the basement, hiding. And so we got him, we made him a prisoner, and the sergeant got a Luger, a German Luger, and one of the Nazi daggers, about that long. And he had a pair of field glasses and a little small 25 caliber gun. So I got that, brought those home, and that was the end of that.
Were you happy to return to the bombers?
Oh, I had fun. No, that was fun. But one of my good friends, I can't think of his, yeah, but he was an officer, and he had been on a couple of and he was captured. And the Germans took him prisoner, and one of the prisoners that was with him was General Patton's son, one of the general's son.
General Patton's son was captured.
Was he?
Yes.
Okay, that was the guy, and they were buddies, and then they escaped.
I think his son-in-law.
Son-in-law. That I'm not going to quibble about either, but they got acquainted, and of course the Germans didn't know that. The Germans didn't know that who he was. Anyway, they got away, and he got back, and the officer was one of our reunion people, and the story's in my journal about him.
Well, I don't know we mentioned it here. I've asked you about this. Did you have a fear of being captured, being a POW?
Well, yeah, if we were shot down over Germany, yeah, we would be. No, well, yeah, I guess so. It must have been in the back of my mind, but I can't remember dwelling on it.
Okay.
Remember, I was still only 19, eh?
Yeah. Do you remember? There must have been about this time that you moved to that last station, Dole,
Dole, yeah.
and that was in France or in Germany?
That was France. But we were closer to Germany.
Okay.
And I flew, I think, only one mission out of Dole. And then I went home. I was in Charlie, England.
Okay. Well, then this would have been just shortly before that. Well, about that same time. April 12th, you got the word, the Americans got the word that Franklin Roosevelt passed
Died,
away.
yeah.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I can still picture myself in the tent. It was kind of a sunshiny day, and we got the word that he had died. And I was dismayed because I knew I was going to try to get back. I thought he'd run again, and I wanted to vote for him. And he was a Democrat, and I'm a Republican, but that's beside the point. I wanted to vote for the guy, but it never came to pass.
And, of course, he served longer than any other president.
Yeah.
That would have been the 48 election.
Yep.
Okay. Just 3 days later, April 15th, 1945, you went on mission number 61.
Okay.
You remember? What do you remember about that last mission?
Really? I don't remember too much. I should, but I don't. I'm pretty sure it was a milk run, and there was nothing important about it or anything like that that I remember. I didn't know at the time it was going to be my last mission.
You didn't know that?
No, had no idea.
What was the rotation supposed to be? I knew for the 17s it was 25 at the beginning of the war, and then they lengthened it.
Went to 35. It was supposed to be, when I went in, it was supposed to be 50 missions. Then they moved it to 60 missions. And I think when I left, it was up to 65 missions.
But 61 was your last one?
Yeah.
And then you got the word that you're being rotated out?
Yeah, I just put on the bulletin board that I was going home. And I didn't know anything about it until then.
And you went up and you argued with them, said, no, I want to go on some more missions.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. However, when I got back to the States, I had, with all my decorations and stuff like that, and I had a lot of them, I had more than enough points to get out. I think it was 84 points, something like that, you could get out, and I had 104. So I actually, when I got back, my mother and my girlfriend were just as mad at me as they could be because I volunteered to go to Japan. And they were really disgusted with me. But I got to California. Can't remember the base of it. Santa Fe, not Santa Fe. Oh, anyway, doesn't make any difference. And they found out I was colorblind. The colorblind test. They had the Jap test, which was the circles. I could never ever pass those. But if they had the yarn test, the red, green, brown, blue, yellow, well, I could pick out the blue and yellow easily. And if red, green, brown, I pick out the brightest one and call it red. I pull the lightest one and call it green, and I passed. I sneaked my way. I'd find out what line was what, and I would switch with the guy if I needed to. And that's how I got by in Europe, but I couldn't get by to go to Japan. So I said, okay, I want to get out. I went home, and I was home. I was in Charlie, England on VE Day. And boy, I'm telling you, England went stark raving mad. All the lights came on. It was really great. And the carousing, you wouldn't believe how happy they were because they had been in the war for a long time. Well, okay, I was there for VE Day, and they sent me home after I said I wanted to get home.
What were you doing in Charlie, in England?
Getting ready to go take a ship home.
So it's just a matter of moving a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Take a ship. Go ahead.
And so I was home on VJ Day, and Omaha went stark raving mad. Not as bad as Britain, but okay. You had another question?
Well, sure. How did you get home? You on ship?
On the ship, on the, gosh, boy, my memory is fading all of a sudden. And there was a famous ship which later sunk in the harbor of New York for some reason or other. But I came home on the ship. We were on the ship. There were 6 bunks high. If you were on the top bunk, you had to climb up into the altitude. And so the thing about that I can remember best about that was going by the Statue of Liberty. I'm telling you, it's a wonder the ship didn't tip over, because we were all on that side, and you've never seen so many GIs salute as it did on that day. It was really quite an experience.
Were you guys cheering, or was it quiet as you went by?
Both. They played the Star Spangled Banner. We came to attention and saluted, and the cheering may have been before or after that. I can't remember that offhand. But yes, there was plenty of cheering.
What did it mean then to see the Statue of Liberty?
Oh, can't tell you. I can't tell you. Because that was the first time I'd seen it. And no, it was something else.
Well, I want to take you back just a couple of reflective questions about your time in Europe during the war. What was your rank by the time you came back?
I was supposed to reach the top of staff sergeant. That was the top for an armament governor. But I became squadron gunner and squadron combat instructor. And as a result, I got an extra stripe, and I was a tech sergeant when I came home.
Which in military parlance is E5? Is that equivalent to a
have no
regular
idea.
sergeant or a staff sergeant? Or
Is a tech sergeant. I don't know. I have no idea. But we didn't have those things. It was staff sergeant, tech sergeant, master sergeant.
Okay. You mentioned medals. What medals did you get?
Well, I got the Croix de Guerre from France. I got the 8 air medals.
Is that for a specific number of missions you get an air medal?
No, and the heavies, it was that way. In order for us to get a medal, intelligence would show the area that we were supposed to bomb, and they would draw a circle. If there was one bomb outside of that circle, we did not get an air medal. Every bomb had to be within the circle or within the thing, and if it was, we got an air medal. So that was ours. We had 2 presidential citations, and then the usual. The one most difficult for me to get was a good conduct medal.
Well, it sounds like you behaved yourself the entire war.
More or less.
Was there something that you haven't told me about here, Jerry?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And you said you never got injured.
Never got injured other than when we were crashed and I hurt my knee and chipped my ring. That's all that ever happened to me.
There's one other thing we haven't talked about in the experience in the European theater. Anybody who ever saw this remembers it. You didn't, but your brother saw one of the concentration camps.
My brother, with Patton, freed Ordruff. There were about 100 of those concentration camps, as I understand it. I'm not sure myself. And Patton and my brother were there, and my brother's been through a lot. My brother had been through a lot.
He was in infantry or
Field artillery.
Okay.
And the Ordruff was the one thing that horrified him. He was so broken up with Ordruff that he couldn't talk about it. Then well after the war, I talked to him about it, and he sent me the pictures that you have there, and some of which he took. And on one of them, it shows a bunch of GIs. My brother is the far left, Eisenhower is kind of in the middle, and Patton is on the right. And these jerks, and I'm calling them jerks that say that they never happened, that's all they are jerks, because it did happen, and it wasn't fake. And I wish some of the people that call it fake, I wish they were there.
It's not one of the better known death camps or concentration
No.
camps,
No, Auschwitz was the biggest one.
but it's an important one from the perspective, as I understand. It's a satellite camp of Buchenwald, and it's the very first camp that the Allies found, and that's why Eisenhower and Patton and Bradley were all there.
You know more than I do.
I've talked to others who were there as
Okay.
well.
See, I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And it was because of that one and what Eisenhower saw. He says, we need to get people here, because he knew that somewhere down the road, just as you said,
Yeah. They're still saying it. I don't know how it can be faked. And like I say, I think there were as many as about 100 of those camps. Auschwitz and was one of the last ones that they went to.
yeah, quite a few in Poland and other
Yeah.
occupied countries. Your official separation, do you remember the date?
August 31st, 1945.
Okay. I saw a document that said July 24th, but you had talked about wanting to go to the Pacific. Why did you want to go to the Pacific?
Jerk. I was stupid. I mean, I shouldn't have. I mean, I love to fly, and I wanted to get into B-29s, and so it was a very stupid thing.
August 6th is the date that the B-29 dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, and then 3 days later in Nagasaki. What did you think about Truman's decision to use the bomb?
Oh, it was absolutely correct, because if those bombs had not been dropped, we would have to invade Japan. That would have cost millions of lives, both Japanese and American. And it saved so many lives. It did a trick on Japan, but not near as bad as if we had tried to invade. Because Japan would have defended that to the last man.
You talked about the celebration in England on VE Day and the celebration in Omaha on VJ Day. I wonder if you can paint us a picture of those two events.
Well, I pretty much painted the picture in Charlie, but like I say, they were drinking up and dancing up and shouting up, and all the lights went on. See, that's the first time lights have gone on in England in many years, and all the lights, every light that they had was going, and I wish I could remember what it was, but they were playing and singing one particular song. I'm sure you know, it was a military type song. I loved it, but I've never heard it since, and I'd sure like to know what it was. And that's what I remember about that. In Omaha on VJ Day, I took the streetcar downtown and saw the festivities there, and it was almost as good as it was in Charlie.
Well, you see the pictures where everybody in the streets dancing and
Well, of course,
celebrating.
that was in New York.
Okay.
You saw that. Yes, but not to the extent of New York.
Okay.
New York was a special place.
Do you remember you talked about the experience of coming into the harbor in New York City and seeing the Statue of Liberty? What do you remember about reuniting with the family and with Mildred?
Okay, I had to talk about that one. I did not tell them I was coming home. And I had actually told the mail people to hold up all of my mail, which they failed to do. And so when I got into New Jersey, I called my sister and let her know I was here, and I said, get the gang together. I'd like to I see them all. I said, don't tell Mom and Dad. She said, well, no, I got to tell Mom and Dad. So she told my mother and Dad. And so when I got home, we had a huge party. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of everything. You know, a lot of tears. There were many, many tears. And gets me even thinking about it. Anyway, my girlfriend was at her baccalaureate, and so they didn't tell her. But we said they had a package from me, and so she should come in when they'd open the package. And so here I go again. Anyway, she knocked on the door, and I opened it, and anyway, each other at arms, and it was I don't know, a half hour. Anyway, that was my homecoming. I'm sorry I broke up.
No, that's perfectly understandable. Did your mom perhaps cook a special meal for you that day?
I have no idea.
Hmm.
If so, she would make spaghetti and meatballs, because that was a favorite of mine. Either that or potato pancakes, and I know she wouldn't make potato pancakes then.
Okay, now that you're back home, and let's get past VJ Day. The war's over. What are you going to do with yourself?
Well, I knew I was going to get a greater education, and I know me. I knew that I would not do well in college. I was a very poor student, but I did go to Van Sant School of Business. Learned to be a secretary, shorthand and the whole bit.
GI Bill.
GI Bill, all free. Finished the school, got a job in a Orchard and Wilhelm furniture company as a secretary to the secretary of the thing, and eventually, and I don't remember how this turned about, but anyway, she said there was a job opening at a different thing that would be better for me, and so I went in and interviewed, and they hired me to be a secretary to the office manager. And it was a finance company, and I worked for them for 42 years. One of the men working there was in charge of the corporate insurance. He was an older gentleman, really nice guy, and he was a student of the insurance business. People from outside would call him for information. Well, he was sickly and out a lot, so they asked me to go down and fill in for him. Then he finally retired, and they said, well, you got the job. And that was my introduction to corporate insurance. I was the corporate insurance manager for the associate, well, actually it was Securities Acceptance Corporation in Omaha, later became Associates, later became Citibank. And the corporate insurance manager, as it expanded and more responsibilities, became risk management. And I was vice president of risk management when I retired 42 years later.
No, very good. Well, you got married here somewhere. When did you get married?
Well, let's see, it was 1946, but I was still working for securities at the time. And well, I never left them, but it was after I left school and became involved in risk and corporate insurance, I should say. And we got married, and I had 56 years of very happy marriage. Had 2 children, 2 daughters, and I made enough money to take care of us. Now, we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we had a very happy life, and my work life was perfect, and it was something I could handle easily.
We've got a couple of pictures I'd like to refer to. One of you early in the war and one towards the end of the war. They're right there.
Yeah, I was 18 there.
On the left-hand side?
On the left-hand side, and I was 19 on the right-hand side after my missions. And
you look a whole lot older.
Yeah. I didn't realize it at the time, but the war actually did age me. It matured me, that's for sure.
Well, you always hear this from a lot of people. I went in as a boy and I came out as a man. Is that true in your case?
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially for me. You can see my girlfriend there before we were married, both of them.
Well, I can understand why you were pining for her while you're over in Europe.
And I started going with her when she was 14 years of age. I worked for a drugstore at the time, and she would come into the drugstore and order a cherry Coke. And she did that for a while, and one day I pushed it back to her. I said, "I can pay for it." She says, "No, I didn't pay for it." And but then her family moved away from the apartment they were in, and I didn't see her for about a month or so. I later became on the opposite side of town. I started working for a Safeway grocery store. I was a bag boy, and one day I was walking away, and she walked through with her parents, and from that moment on, that was it. So
She was your girl, huh?
she was my girl. We'd go to what we called community sings, where about 4,000 or 5,000 people would sit on the grass, and they had a big screen with things like that. And we sat on a blanket near their parents, and the blanket gradually got further and further away from their parents. But anyway, it was a very delightful time.
There's one other part of your life we haven't touched on yet, and it's represented in what you're wearing also with the cross. Somewhere in your life, you decided...
that's a good... I was a Missouri Synod Lutheran, by the way. Shortly after you can cut this out if you don't want it. I wanted to become a Mason because two of my uncles and my future father-in-law were 32nd degree Masons. So I wanted to become a Mason. So I told my mother that. She said, "Well, you better go talk to Pastor Otto." Why? "Well, you just go and talk to him." So he said, "Well, you can't be a Mason and a Lutheran." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, it's just the way it is." I said, "Okay, goodbye." Well, my wife, my girlfriend, went to the Episcopal church. So I started going to the Episcopal church, and they had a brilliant priest in charge who later became Bishop of Oklahoma. And one day I says, we went to various meetings. I went to a meeting, and I told him, I says, "Dean, I think I want to become a deacon." I said, "Oh," he said, "Okay," but he says, "Jerry, this is not the time in the Episcopal Church for a deacon." I said, "Okay." He said, "You will know." Well, I got to Indiana, and I talked to the dean there. I said, "Dean, I think I want to become a deacon." He said, "Come with me." So I came with him. He opened his drawer, pulled out an application already filled out with my name on it. Yeah. I'm sorry. But anyway, he said, "It's about time you got here." He took me right up to Bishop, and Bishop said, "Well, it's about time you get here." So they had been waiting for me. But in those days, you had to have a calling.
Well, what did it mean to be a deacon?
Well, there's bishops, priests, and deacons in the Episcopal Church, all ordained. The deacon is a servant ministry. That's all I wanted. I didn't want to become a priest. I didn't want to become a bishop. I wanted to be a servant. And so the Episcopal Church at that time did not have a diaconate ministry. So I went to Notre Dame for 5 years and took holy orders. And 3 of our priests from the Episcopal Church were professors at Notre Dame. So after 5 years, I had developed a program for the non-stipendiary diaconate, non-stipendiary priesthood for the Episcopal Church in Indiana, and I took it, and I passed both. I passed for both the priest and for the deacons, but I chose to remain the deacon.
And if I understand what you were saying correctly, you aren't going to make any money doing this. Is that correct?
No, it's free. It's a freebie. Some deacons I think get paid, but when I was in Texas for a while, I was working so hard at hospital and stuff like that. They gave me some gas money, but I always donated it back. But no.
You mentioned this was a calling, and that's a term that's always used in religious terms, but can you explain how you got that sense that this is what you needed to do?
No, it's just there. It was just there. something about the Episcopal Church just drew me into it. And no, I just felt it in my heart that that's what I wanted to do. And it took 5 years.
So now you're how old?
94.
And so you're retired from being a deacon?
No.
See, I knew the answer.
No, actually, when I was 72 is supposed to be the retirement age of clergy. And when I moved to Illinois, I told the dean of the cathedral that I was retiring. He said, "No, you're not." And he took me to the bishop. The bishop says, "No, you're not." Both of them have since retired, but they won't let me retire. And I don't want to retire. Well, no, I take that back. I told him I would go until I was 95, and we'll look at it at that time.
And your life wasn't quite busy enough. There's one other aspect of your life we haven't talked about. You decided somewhere along the line, as I understand, to join the reserves. Tell me about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, very shortly after I got out. Like I said, I liked the military. I liked it. So I don't think anybody talked me into the reserves, as near as I can recall. I joined the reserves, but they found out my background, and so I was immediately made a second lieutenant. I had to pass a few tests, but I was made a second lieutenant, and then I got up to the captaincy. I was up for my majority, and it was at the time when the country was trying to save money. So they reduction in force, thousands of us, and including my brother, who was a colonel at the time. He was a colonel and in charge of the West Virginia Military District. They said, "Well, you can stay in as a master sergeant, still in charge of the West Virginia Military." He said, "No, I'm going to let you get out too." So we both got out. But that was my career.
Did you join VFWs or American Legion, anything like that?
Originally, I did join the VFW and the American Legion, but organizations of that type didn't appeal to me. So I had too much in my ministry. I had too much in my work. I didn't have enough time for them. So I was a service officer for the VFW for a bit, but I just couldn't. I was too busy to do it.
But I have seen pictures of you. It looks like you're attending reunions.
Yes, but my bomb group reunions.
Right.
Yeah, and we had those up until about 4, 5, 6 years ago. But we dwindled in numbers so much that we could no longer afford to have a reunion, and so we had to stop it.
You've talked quite a bit about that trip back to Europe. 80, 81, 85, somewhere.
1980, 1985. I think I made 3 trips back there.
Okay.
Oh, did I tell about Uli?
No.
Okay. When we were bombing Stuttgart, Germany. And we were getting shot up like you wouldn't believe. There's more to the story, and I'm not going to tell this. But anyway, we were really getting shot up. And we got back. I didn't have any injuries or anything like that. And we landed the ship. And in I think it was 1980, I was retracing my steps of World War II. I'd been to Sardinia, Corsica, and then I was in France. And then I was going to take a train to Berlin because I had 2 cousins who we lost sight of. They were Berliners. On the train was a German woman and 2 German men, both of whom spoke good English. And so they asked me what I did, where I was going, and I told them I was retracing my steps of World War II, and I was a little bit antsy about that, but it didn't seem to bother them. They said, "What did you do?" Well, I was real antsy about answering that question. I said, "I was in bombers," and so I asked the oldest one, I said, "Were you in the German army?" "Yeah." "What were you?" And he said, "I was an anti-aircraft gunner." I said, "Oh, where were you stationed?" He said, "Stuttgart." I said, "Oh my God, I'll never forget that place. It was on April 1st, Easter Sunday. I didn't get any further. He held up 2 fingers, 2 engine. He was shooting at me. And that was Uli Bear, B-E-R-R. Uli and I became great friends. I visited him twice or 3 times in Braunschweig, Germany. He and his wife traveled a lot. They were to the States 2 or 3 times to visit our family. And every New Year's Day, either he called me or I called him to wish each other a Happy New Year. We became great friends.
How do you explain that? Because there was every reason to have great resentment about that.
No, but I was never that way.
And obviously he wasn't either.
No.
And it's almost
There were a lot of people like us.
because you'd gone through the same thing, even though you went through his enemies. There is that a bond.
There's a bond. I think so. Yeah, we became just very, very good friends. So it. Uli was a professor of engineering at Braunschweig University.
Did you ever talk much about the war, or you moved on beyond that?
I can't remember. I don't think we, as I recall, I'd say probably the answer to that question is no.
But he came to the United States to visit you.
Yeah, especially my brother who was living in Florida. He visited my family, and so yeah, it was a very close association.
Well, that's an incredible story.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful story, frankly.
You've had quite a few of those today. All 3 sessions.
Sorry.
That's why we're sitting here and doing that. So looking back at that experience, and obviously we focus most of our time talking about your war experiences. Did that year in combat change you?
Well, I'm sure it matured me. Yeah, I'm sure that it always by the picture that I had aged. And I didn't realize it at the time until I saw those pictures, frankly, that I had aged. But
I'm sure your mom and your dad, especially your mom, I'm sure she figured it out when you came home.
I don't know. Never said. I don't think it was ever mentioned. But I grew up in that respect. I looked at things differently, that's for sure.
How so?
Well, I guess about the only thing I can say about it is I had a different viewpoint of people. And I knew what I liked and what I didn't like. For example, bigotry, I never ever have liked bigotry. And if anything, it was worse. I was never a racist, and even less so after I got back. Because of what I learned later about the red tails, that they were black. And what they went through to get to where they were was really something. And
of course, that's what the Nazis were all about.
Yeah. And of course, the German people per se were really not that bad. Only the Nazis. I don't think the German people themselves liked the Nazis. I mean, I'm talking about the non-Nazis. But there were plenty of Nazis, male and female. And that was pretty bad.
What lessons would you take away from that experience today? If you were to try to tell young people who don't know much at all about it, what message would you want to give them?
Well, you mean as to the service?
Yeah, about what your experience is.
I always encourage both, primarily male, but even female, to go into the military. I said it's a good growing up experience. And if they take care of themselves and don't do anything foolish themselves, they will get a lot out of the experience. And I truly believe that to this day.
Do you think the sacrifices that you made, the death and destruction that you saw, was it worth it?
It had to be done. It had to be done. Remember, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor when I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was when they talked about it. Had no idea where it was. But they started the war, and then of course Hitler got involved and declared war on us. We had to do what we did. What was done had to be done. It had to be done then. Had we allowed Hitler or the Japanese to go on, where would we be today? No. As to the war, it was something that had to be done. Now, if you ask me about Korea, I'm not too sure about Korea. If you ask me about Vietnam, I got a definite thing. That was a truly political war. The politicians got us into that, and I feel sorry for the poor GIs that had to put up with it. They did a bang-up job. The GIs in Vietnam are really unsold heroes. They're not given the credit that was due them, and they were booed when they come back. And at the beginning of the Vietnam War, they had Jane Fonda, and I didn't like her at the time because I thought she was wrong. Once I learned that it was a political war, then they were right, and we shouldn't be there. And I'll say the same with regard to the Middle East. The Middle East people have been fighting, the tribes in the Middle East have been fighting for thousands of years, tribe against tribe, whatever it is. We shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be there. Let them fight their own fights.
Even after 9/11?
Yeah, well, of course, 9/11 changed that aspect of it. But maybe 9/11 would never have taken place had we not been there. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not that wise. But yeah, after 9/11, no, we have to finish it, but I still say stay out of the Middle East. Because those tribes, I'm talking about Israel too. Israel had 12 tribes. That's the same way. And they were fighting each other.
Well, let's draw back from all contemporary politics. Do you have any final words for us? Because this has been a great interview and have wonderful memory of these things. And I appreciate you suffering through all the questions and sharing all of these stories with us, because it's really good insight into what it was truly like for you and other Americans who experienced that. Any final words?
Only I enjoyed this interview. It brought back a lot of things that I had actually forgotten. Now you're bringing up the comments that I made. Well, yeah, I wrote those many years ago, and forgotten them. So you brought back made some fresh memories out of it, and I don't mind it. The only thing maybe, gosh darn, you haven't given me enough time to think of it. I would say that what we know now, what to know today, there are so many bad politicians that do many bad things. And I'm not talking about party either. I'm talking about all politicians, Democrat, Republican, Independent. Use your own discretion. Use your own mind as to whether what they're saying is true. I don't know of any politician that doesn't lie. Maybe not as much as one we know now, but you got to take everything with a grain of salt and think about it, and then act intelligently. That's about the only thing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, we're just a week away from the next election, so that's probably a good way to finish today.
Well, let's see. Let me say one thing, without mentioning any names. I know one thing, that in the future, when I vote, I will never, ever vote for a compulsive liar, or I will not vote for anyone that has bad morals. I will not vote for anybody that picks on females. And I won't vote for anybody corrupt. Now, that's individuals. I'm not saying who, but you know, you can use your imagination. And I'm a Republican.
Well, let me end on a positive note with this comment. Because of you guys, because of that greatest generation, the World War II generation, and for what has happened since that time, Americans have the right to vote.
Oh, gosh. Well, not only the right, they have to vote.
They
I've never missed an election since 1946.
So thank you for your service. Thank you for what you did, and especially thank you for an outstanding interview, Jerry.
I enjoyed it very much.
And thank you for joining us. Appreciate you being here with us.